Welcome to Powered by Nyame. I'm your guide and host. On this episode, we will focus on pretenders and how to reveal their true intentions. Now, there are different kinds of pretenders. There are those that will pretend to be your friend, there are those that pretend to love you, there are those that pretend to have your back and have your best interests in mind and in heart. All of these pretenders boil down to really one thing. You see, ultimately, they are there to serve a purpose. And that purpose is much like the video we did on frenemies. So you can go check that out if you haven't done so already. So let's get back to pretenders. I'm going to start with a story now. And in this episode, I share with you a few stories. So I know a man, a grown man, very mature man, who's an elder now. And when he was a younger man, he met this woman. And what attracted him was her fine shape and figure and something about her that certainly captivated him and even captured him. Short story shorter, he married this woman. They had a child and other children and lived with her for a number of years. And over those years, let's say 20 years, for the sake of this story, he did not realize who she really were. And on her part, the key to her success as a pretender is that in his presence, she behaved and spoke and did all the things that perhaps he would expect. And so, even though there were, I can't call them red flags, maybe pink flags, right, in front of him, they perhaps weren't as severe as to match who she really was. And in this story, the roles could be reversed. It could be a he who is a pretender and a she who's the person that sees the pink flags. So, all those years, he did not fully realize or appreciate who she were because she went along with the program as he laid out. You know, the values, the views, the practices, the rituals that were important for him and his family. And after he was kicked out of the house and essentially could not return, and so they split. Um, he knew something about her, but then fully began to appreciate who she really was, and who she really was became clear through the treatment of the children. And so pretenders have a way of staying the course, whether that be a year, months, or many years, because they're able to capture and captivate us in the first place, us being whoever is the recipient or the partner to this pretender. That's the first thing. Second, they're able to essentially hold on and continue the performance because it is a performance, it is an acting, world class acting, professional acting that is able to essentially smile and laugh and say the right things, or at least the things that don't cause too much of a stir. Even if it ruffles a few feathers, as it were, it won't cause too much of a stir. And then, even when there is a stir, there's a way that the person has learned to know the partner that they're with to sort of assuage their guilt, to assuage their conscience, and to sort of calm them down to the extent that they can simply just continue to move on. So they may kiss their teeth and say, sure, and then move on. So they may sense something, they being the partner to the pretender, but it may not be sufficient enough to cause a rupture or a split or a moving on. Now, I know from personal experience of a pretender because I was married to one. And almost 17, 18 years. And this person pretended to be something that she was not. And so I can relate to this man that I know who's an elder now because our stories are very similar. And what you find, viewers and subscribers to this channel, is that the story of a pretender is very similar. The signs are ubiquitous, they're commonplace, they are things that will cut across gender, will cut across age, will cut across all the sort of markers of being human. And so in my story, this pretender captivated me, said all the right things. I was into African culture, at least so I thought. Was into, or claimed to be into, ancestry and rituals and practices, the things that I do as a healer, all things that I value and things that are important to me. And so the captivation is that I thought I had a match, right? I wouldn't go as far as soulmate, but I had a match. Someone that I can partner with and build a family and build ourselves together and so on. And so the first was the captivation, the capture. And then, whether a real spell or the spell of the person, the capture or captivation, that spell took a hold. And in that spell, I want to share with you, particularly men who are watching this, never wash the underwears of the woman that you're with. You will become her servant. And I won't go into the sort of spiritual mechanics of it all, but you will become her servant. And you may not realize it because remember, the mind is a spirit. The brain is the physical organ, the material thing that's in your head, that's in my skull. But the mind is a spirit, it's immaterial. That's what spirits are. They're immaterial forces, energies that speak to us. That's why, for example, we can have two minds, because our mind is split, meaning that our spirit is, there's a tension between our soul, truly who we are, and our spirit, called the mind. And so the spirit, right, the spirit can become very much, captivated. And indeed, spells, captivation set its course, saying all the right things I wanted to hear. And that's another sign of pretenders. They will study you, they will observe you closely, and they will use either spiritual means or the power of observation, close observation, to figure out the things that essentially make you tick, the things that you claim to care about and value. And they'll begin to what? Speak to that, echo that, right? Because we like to hear ourselves in that way. And so that set in. And like the elder who I mentioned a moment ago, not by name but by story, we had a child and we had children. And by then, even though I saw the pink flags and even red flags, I said, okay, we can work things out. We can figure things out. But here's the thing about pretenders. You can't figure things out. In other words, you can't be angry or mad at a person for being who they are. You can't, even when you figure it out, because that's who they are. And so the key then was to go through a heavy, heavy spiritual ritual detox, in my case, where there was eventually a divorce, a split, just like the elder whom I mentioned a moment ago, and a deep, deep, along the way, before the divorce and after the divorce, deep ritual detox. Because that captivation of the spirit, that soul, that stuff doesn't go away. You have to detox, you have to cleanse, you have to rid yourself of the way in which that pretender essentially bounded you. And so do not wash or touch or handle the underwears of a woman. Even if, in my case, I have also girl children, do not. You'll become their servants too. Let them wash their own underwears collectively. Because there's a way in which, by doing so, spiritually speaking, you become their servant. And your mind will tell you that you're just being nice, you're just being a father, you're just being a husband, right? You're just, doing your job, you're just helping out. That's what the mind will tell you, because that mind, that spirit has already been captivated by the ritual significance of you as a man washing the underwear for the woman that you're with and for the girl child or girl children either from you or from a previous relationship. So let them wash their own. Now, if you have done so, here's a ritual you can do. All you need is some salt, either a grapefruit or an orange, right? And you rub them together from your fingertips to your elbow. And you cleanse both hands and arms. And then you wash it off. And you never wash anyone's drawers of the female persuasion again. It's that simple. And you'll see the difference. You'll see the difference if that this applies to you. And so, back to pretenders. So, having lived with one, right, and having had the perspective from having lived with one and being around one, these pretenders, in fact, they fall into that categories of those enemies that disguise themselves, enemies on the spiritual side of things that take physical form or that enter a physical form, either way, and seek to get close as possible to you to destroy you, to ruin you. Because this person that I was married with ultimately have tried and still tries to destroy me. Obviously, it doesn't work, but they try, and they have tried. In fact, they try to be me, but they can't. But I get it because they were sent from the spiritual side, right, to come and do the work here. Because when I go back home, that is to this home, my home is spirit, and all our home is spirit, they would have had a victory or the greatest victory over me. So they'll be victorious there by virtue of being victorious here. So these pretenders, you can unmask the true intentions, right? And particularly when it matters relationship and love. You know a pretender because a pretender, for example, let's say you're a woman, they may want to befriend you. And when you ask them or say to them, or when people will say, hey, you two get along well, are you sure you're just friends? And they'll say, no, we're just friends. That's a pretender, right? No man wants to be a friend of a woman long term, solely a friend, right? No one wants to be solely a friend of a woman long term, especially a single man. And the other sign of a pretender, sticking with the female example and a man who is seeking her, is that, and it could, by the way, this could go both ways. So you can flip the roles and the matter will still be true. Is that the pretender will also study you hard. They'll find out and discover and seek ways to record and etch in their brain all your habits, all your idiosyncrasies, all your do's and don'ts and dislikes. Why? Because they want to get very, very close to you, right? Because their aim is not to be your soulmate. It's not to feed you. Their aim is ultimately to undermine you or to use you for whatever purposes that they were sent from the other side to do so. And so the pretender will indeed even claim they love you and say they love you, right? Now, the pretender, when things get rocky, will look to leave, will look to go, because the pretender already has a plan B and plan C in place. This person I was married to had plan B and plan C in place. So when I told this person that I'm quitting my job, say, okay, there was no worries, there was no, normally, someone who loves you will say, what are we going to do? How are we going to take care of our bills? How are we going to take care of the family? It was okay, because this person already had a plan B and plan C and was simply pretending to hold on to derive and suck out whatever benefits they could from whatever they perceived to be my status, at the moment. A pretender will do that. They're looking for something that you have that they want. And they'll hang around as long as possible and as hard as possible, right? And they'll try to say, no, I love you, I care about you. But let me reveal to you when somebody truly loves you and is not a pretender, and how to uncover the true pretenders that are out there. When you're not well, and the person is willing to wipe your backside freely on their own volition, wipe your backside after pooping, right? That's not a pretender. When you are ill or sick or not yourself, And they will put themselves for you, before themselves, and sacrifice without saying they're sacrificing. This is key, because a pretender will always remind you, I was there for you. I did this for you. A person whose intentions are not there to pretend will never remind you, will never say, well, I was there for you. I didn't have to do this for you. That's a pretender. A non-pretender, a person whose intentions are true and genuine, will never hold that over your head and say, look what I did for you. Look what I've done for you. Especially moments of anger, because that's when the pretenders really come out. A true person, right, will simply move on, because their aim was never to do this for reward or for congratulations or for a purpose other than simply being there for you. A true person that's not a pretender will, when your body itches, will powder you over, right? And you can feel and sense the spirit and soul of that person with their touch. A true person who's not there to pretend will cook for you, not because they have to, and not because they want to. And even if you say, no, it's okay, they may still do it and say, okay, I did make some for you. If you change your mind, it's here for you. That's someone who's not a pretender. A pretender will say, okay, you don't want anything. All right, fine. And we'll move on. Or they try to force the issue. And they'll get to a point where they say, oh, okay, all right, I'll leave you alone. But someone who's not a pretender doesn't simply want to know you. They will understand you. And there's a difference. Knowing you is a catalog of likes and dislikes and idiosyncrasies, all the things that they have observed about you, that they studied you. Understanding you is a different layer and level. It's not knowing. Understanding you is knowing who you truly are. Is your soul, not your spirit, not the mind, but your soul. They understand you, right? So even if you push them away, even if you say, I don't want anything, I'm fine, they know. They understand when you're not fine and when you are. They understand when you say, I'm good, and when you're really good and when you're not good. They understand that, right? Because they can sense it, they can feel it. You see, when two hearts are conjoined and they begin close enough, not to beat as one yet, but they're close enough, right? And they're getting there. You will understand when that person is fine, when that person's okay, when that person's I'm good is really good, and when it's not. That's not a pretender. You see, you can't pretend when the hearts begin to come close and close. And you know it's close because you begin to feel what they feel. You begin to feel their pregnancies. You begin to feel their joys. You begin to feel their disgust and anger before they do. You begin to feel their anxieties. You begin to feel their nervousness. You begin to feel when they're not righted. You begin to feel when they want comfort from you and only you. They begin to feel when they want you to sing and they know you're not a singer, but they want you to sing because you're not really singing. You're touching their soul through this from your soul. And so, whether it's the elder that I mentioned, myself, or others that you know in your experience, pretenders can be revealed. Not even over time, it doesn't take long. Because you too have to notice and can notice the signs I've shared with you and more. The gestures, the posturing, the behaviors. When you add them up, in a short time, doesn't take long, right? Doesn't take years, right? You can see this over weeks and months. You too, right? So while your heart is open and your mind is open, make sure the heart and the mind are in sync. And when they're in sync, and by heart I mean the soul, and when they're in sync, you will be able to see clearly, like looking through glass, the intentions of the pretender. And what do you do, pretenders? You send them on their way. This is not for me, right? And if they push back, you know why they're pushing back, right? Because they want to stick around. And they will begin to what? Become nasty. That's when you know it's confirmation that they were pretending. So, For this episode of Powered by Nyame, I've been your guide and host. Please put your comments, questions, and experiences and things you want to share about this episode in the comment section below. Until next time, for another episode, stay well.